virtually all of the world's militaries were looking at semi-automatic firearms for infantrymen in the days before World War II. The U.S. Army adopted the U.S. Rifle Cal 30 M1, the Garand. The Germans later developed the G41, then the G43. But when you're talking semi-automatic rifles with the Soviets, that gun is the Tokarev, the SVT-38 and 40.
The Russians were early into the game of trying to replace their Army's bolt-action rifle with a semi-automatic rifle. They had developed two competing designs, one from Simonov, one from Tokarev, as replacements for the Model 1891 Mosin Nagant. And neither of those guns was entirely satisfactory. The Tokarev, in particular, was too heavy. The Simonov was too light and too fragile, and violated the usual Russian philosophy of keep it simple and keep it rugged. It was just the opposite. It was complicated and fragile. The Tokarev, on the other hand, was too heavy and had not been fully developed. Tokarev went back to work and tried to fix the problems in his gun. Unfortunately, he did not have the luxury of peacetime conditions to do it in. Nonetheless, the gun had a great deal of promise. He put a hole in the barrel, mounted a gas piston, a stationary piston above that hole, put a movable cylinder around that piston, connected the cylinder to an op rod that ran the action, and voila, he had a gas system that is still widely copied today.
At the outbreak of World War II, the only combatant nation that had a standard issue semi-automatic rifle was the United States with the M1 Garand. And it was a delightful rifle, a rifle that experienced some teething pains before it finally saw mainstream combat in Europe and the Pacific. But other countries lagged behind. The Soviets developed the SVT-38 and then 40. And to be honest, the SVT, it's got kind of a Rube Goldberg-esque design to it. There are a lot of pieces. It took a lot of precision machining, something that the Soviets weren't terribly good at. And the SVT was reliable so long as the parts were to specification and so long as the gun was kept clean. And when you fight in the conditions that the Soviet infantrymen had to fight in during World War II, it is extremely difficult to keep a gun clean. And when a Tokarev is not kept clean, it stops working.
The crowning achievement of Tokarev's design was the gas system. At a time when everybody else was floundering around trying to come up with a gas system that worked, the United States had first adopted a gas trap in the M1 Garand. After 2 or 3 years, discovered that was a mistake and went back and undid it all. The Germans were hopelessly behind. They refused to drill holes in the barrel, so that relegated them to muzzle attachments which gathered up all the fouling and clogged up the gun. The French had not been able to make a gun that worked. Nobody had really succeeded in coming up with a gas system for a semi-automatic service rifle that was both light enough and simple enough to warrant adoption. But Tokarev did it, and his system was unique at the time.
Surprisingly, the rifles were capable of good accuracy, to the point that the Soviets actually set them up as sniping rifles. And the good thing about a Tokarev as a sniper rifle is, of course, it's semi-automatic, it's self-loading, doesn't give away your position, and also compared to a 5-round internal magazine of a Mosin Nagant, the clip of a Tokarev is huge. You can shoot all day.
The SVT-40 was not really a success. During the course of the war, the Russians realized that they'd better stay with the Mosin Nagant. And production of the SVT-40, which had been envisioned to completely replace the bolt-action rifle, was instead throttled down. And in early 1945, it was discontinued altogether.
The Tokarev was used to some effect during World War II, but it's what it represented, and that's semi-automatic fire and even selective fire in the hands of a Soviet infantryman. And the basic idea of giving an infantryman a selective fire rifle was a good one. The Tokarev was just the wrong gun for the job. The 7.62x54 is a very powerful cartridge, but the idea of what the Tokarev could have been was fully materialized with the adoption of the Avtomat Kalashnikov, the AK-47.